Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am joined by guest Dale Davidson. Dale, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Folks, we are going to talk about how to start working for yourself as a solo 1099 federal subcontractor. But first, Dale, could you let people know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, my name is Dale Davidson. I'm the author of a book called Going 1099: How to Become a Solo Federal Subcontractor and Gain Control of Your Working Life, Earn More Money, and Unlock More Free Time. It's a very short title. And I also have a small government contracting business with about 7 employees at the moment.
Excellent. There's so many great places to start. I think the first is probably hourly billing.
Yes.
Government and higher ed are 2 places where I constantly get pushback from people like, "Well, yeah, I'd love to ditch hourly billing, but I work for the government or I work for a university, and their procurement department requires that I bill hourly." So I'd like to talk with you about how you make that not horrible, like how you navigate that and, s especially for someone who's
Sure.
thinking about starting out and going solo.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, so there's no way to make it not horrible, Jonathan. I'm sorry to say. No, I'm just kidding. Um, so hourly billing is indeed nuts, and I agree with you on that. But I do believe it is useful. So I started off as an employee working for a government contracting firm where they would bill me out hourly on various projects, and I really just wasn't a great employee. So I wanted to start working for myself. And I've tried a few different side projects and side businesses that never really got anywhere. But there was one project where I was really valuable to my customer, my end client, the government client,
Mhm.
and they were putting more money on the contract. And I was the only one with the security clearance at the company who could also do uh, Excel data analysis and pivot tables. So not high value, but also they didn't have anyone else. So I used that as leverage to convert my job into a 1099, uh, basically an hourly role. Um, so while it was still hourly, what was important was that I was able to get more autonomy and actually get paid more in the end. So like the first um, year, I made it a point of not working Fridays. And
Mhm.
then while doing that, I was still able to increase my income from about, I was still a pretty junior, 75K, 80K a year to the equivalent of maybe like 130, 140K a year after accounting for all the benefits and stuff.
Hmm.
I'd have to pay for myself. So while hourly billing isn't great, I would say if you're trying to start working for yourself, it's a great way to kind of do like a business somewhere in between, like having a full time job and like like a product based or fixed fee type consulting business. So I will say it's useful. I'd also say that though fixed price is possible. It's just rare, especially if you're just hiring yourself out, just because uh, the federal government basically uses these contracts as staff augmentation. It's much higher. You literally need acts of Congress to increase the number of government employees the government can hire, but the contracting money is separate and it's a lot more flexible. So you basically have this whole duplicate extended workforce that are just contractors.
Hmm. Let's drill into some specifics just to flesh that story out a little bit more. To the extent that you can say,
Yeah.
why did you have a security clearance in the first place?
Oh, well, I went into the Navy right after college. I did Navy ROTC, and my big plan was to become a Navy SEAL. So I actually got into training. It's pretty competitive as an officer to get in, and then I realized my 17-year-old self made a very bad decision for my 21, 22-year-old self. Didn't actually like getting wet and sandy. It wasn't jiving with the culture. And I had as an 18-year-old, I had mentally and contractually committed to joining the Navy before I even knew myself at all. So I ended up going to the Navy, and through that process, I ended up getting a clearance. And fortunately, I was able to get out relatively quickly. And once I had that, a few years later, I was able to get a job at that consulting company that I mentioned. And there's always a shortage of people with higher end security clearances. Uh,
Mhm.
so there's a little bit of an administrative barrier to doing that kind of work, which is
Mm.
partially why I'm valuable, not because I'm some great data analyst or anything.
Right. Okay, that's an is having security clearance a somewhat of a necessity for someone who wants to go 1099 with the government?
No, I wouldn't say it's a necessity, but it does shrink the amount of people that are available to do certain types of work. So my customers have been like intelligence agencies in the end. But
Mm.
if you're a software developer, like a lot of your audience is, if you're really good at something the government is hiring for or is having trouble hiring for, or a government contracting firm is having hiring for,
Mhm.
you should be able to do it on the skills. But I'd also like to say a big part of it, just like any consulting business, is your client relationship. So while skills is one part of what's your value add, and maybe the potential labor force is another component. If you have a good relationship with a government client that has the ability to, nudge their prime contractor to bring you on, uh, that gives you a lot of leverage. So no, it's not necessary. It's helpful, but it's certainly possible to do it without a security clearance.
Okay. But it sounds like if you did have a security clearance, that would increase scarcity and perhaps uh, the likelihood that you would close deals and perhaps the likelihood that you'd be able to raise your rates.
Yeah, there's definitely a premium for having a security clearance, particularly a high level one. I will say it comes with trade offs. Like if you wanted to work remotely, that is basically not possible on a full time basis if you're going to go into a work that requires security clearance.
Interesting.
So you'll have to be on site with the government.
Oh, good point. Good. I'm glad you brought that up. It wouldn't even have occurred to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the nature, again, to the extent that you can say, what was the nature of the consulting firm that you ended up working at? Like what?
Yeah, so they primarily focused on what's called human capital consulting or HR consulting, and that spanned quite a few different things. Like it could be performance management, training the government how to implement, performance management systems where you're basically like tell your employees to set smart goals and for these, in these categories, and this is how you train your supervisors to assess whether they met those goals. Or they did stuff like organizational change management, a lot of which I still don't really understand if that does anything. But
Yeah.
what I did personally was I spent some time doing what's called workforce analytics. So basically, trying to I joke it's counting the number of people at an organization, seeing how many people left, seeing how many people joined, and making charts out of it. Uh, so that's what I ended up doing.
Okay, so sort of like a analyst, data visualization for HR consulting firm that was
Yep.
working for the government.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, and that was uh, you alluded briefly to something that I have heard about once or twice in the past, where a a sort of, it's call it an independent person, a solo freelancer type of person.
Mhm.
It can be, at least this is what I have heard, it can be very difficult to get over that first hurdle and get hired, and it can be directly by some government organization, but it's more likely, it's a much easier path to go through an already approved, I don't know what the term is, but approved vendor
Yeah.
and just get a job there.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's in my book title, I talk about solo federal subcontracting, right? So if you win a contract with the federal government directly, you're considered the prime contractor.
Mhm,
And below that, they may subcontract some work out um, to for various reasons, but that is what I teach people to do. So instead of you going to the government and saying, "Hey, hire me for, 150 bucks an hour directly," and you having to deal directly with the government, you
mhm,
might go to a company like Booz Allen or Deloitte,
mhm,
and let's say they're having trouble filling one of their spots that the government paid them or has hired them to fill.
mhm.
You can jump in and say, "Hey, I have a good relationship with this customer. I have the skill set. You can bring me on at, X dollars per hour."
And remind me, you said something about the government nudging their primary, like, how do you have that relationship in the first place?
Yeah, so in my book, I primarily target people who are already working in the industry as government contractors. So, like myself, I was already working with a government client directly. She really liked my work, and she managed some money for the government. So she
Mhm.
wanted to keep me on, which that is the key leverage point for basically any consulting business, but also in government consulting. The client relationship is the most important. So basically, y- if you already have to be working in this industry in some capacity, most likely as a government contractor. If you want to go down this route of working for yourself, it's not necessary if you're super technical, if you or if you're an AI expert now and the government wants to get into that, like, yeah, you can do it. But um, this is mainly an industry that people somehow found their way into it, in some capacity. And by the time you've been in it for a few years, you've likely already developed relationships, and it's just a matter of you know taking advantage of that or leveraging it when the time is right.
So for who's the ideal reader for the book? Like, what is their employment scenario when
Yeah,
they would be
if I could just target, sorry to interrupt, but
No, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would say the ideal uh, target customer here, or the person who should go 1099, is someone who's working for a government contracting firm already. For whatever reason, they don't fit in as an employee, or they want to get paid more than what they could uh, get from just either switching jobs or getting a raise. And they want that autonomy. They want to be able to control a little more of uh, how they work and when they work. I honestly, I've been telling people that if you don't already work as a in the government contracting industry, I probably wouldn't try to get into it in the first place. I don't know if it's worth it. just as just as fair warning.
Right, right. So let me unpack this a little bit because it's so confusing. It probably isn't confusing. I just like I'm making
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
assumption here. So let's say Booz Allen, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is you would be going from being a full-time employee with Booz Allen to being a
Mhm.
1099 that Booz Allen hires.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny because in my brain I was conflating because Booz Allen is a contractor,
Yeah.
but you're an employee, but they are contracting, even though so you're just changing the nature of your relationship between you and Booz
And
Allen, not
and
you and the
Booz Allen.
government.
Correct.
Okay.
The government doesn't particularly care about your status. There are some nuances to this administratively, but no, they don't care. So it's just your relationship with Booz Allen in this case.
Got it. Okay. So if you're currently working at some kind of a consulting firm that has a relationship with the government, contract with the government, then you could potentially get yourself some more autonomy and freedom and perhaps more money by quitting and saying, well, but you can hire me. You can kind of white label me.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. And then I'd also say, so I now have a business, with a few employees. One of the things I've enjoyed about your work is you kind of talking about hands work and uh, mind work. Not to say that
Brains work. Yeah. Hands
brains
and
work.
brains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So while working, doing the same thing you were doing as an employee at working for yourself but working for yourself as a 1099 is fun, I would say, for the first few years, and making the extra money, for the first few years is great. If you don't actually like doing that work, going 1099 is not going to solve it. And then there's also a natural transition point where, you just get tired of it, which is the reason I, wanted to hire people so I could eventually not do billable work myself. I've realized I'm not actually particularly suited to client work. It was just the fastest way to become self-employed in a way that's not eating ramen for a couple of years trying to build a startup or something like that.
Right. And now these people that your employees are legitimate employees, or are these also subcontractors?
No, it's not. It's not an endless chain of 1099
Yeah.
subcontracting. Although sometimes that happens.
1099s all the way down.
Yeah. It's a Russian nesting doll.
Mhm.
No, so they are full-time employees, but my company currently exclusively subcontracts. We're trying to do more to become a prime. But like one of the ways you can grow is, let's say you start off 1099 to Booz Allen, you do good work for the end client, the government, and then another spot opens up that they need to fill on their contract, they would go, "Hey, Dale at Custom Analysis, this client likes you. Do you have anyone that could uh, fill this spot?" And that's exactly how we got our first employee, which was, "Hey, now you can work. Um, you can work for Custom Analysis. Custom Analysis subcontracts to Booz, and otherwise, and we have our own company now, essentially. Um, so it's a very strange, industry, where there's, whole businesses built out of exclusively subcontracting.
Right,
But even if your ambition is greater than just working for yourself, this is a nice stepping stone to moving in that direction
right. And when you say prime, do you mean working directly
with the government.
with the
Yeah,
government? Okay.
yeah.
So, if you I was following you, I thought, until you said that's how you got your first employee. S so
Okay, yeah. Um, so I was an independent, 1099 contractor to a Booz Allen equivalent. Um,
and you're working directly with the government contact person. You're
yeah,
on
so I
site,
I sat
they
on
know
site.
you.
Yep, I
Okay,
developed a good relationship with the customer. My primary interaction with the prime was I invoiced them and sent them the hours, and they'd pay it. But otherwise, I was basically like another staff member for the government. That's what the contract was in this case. And another spot, another position that was on that prime contract. So the Booz Allen needed another me,
mhm,
essentially, in my office, working with the same client, doing the exact same thing. And they said, "Hey, if you have anyone, you can fill it." So we managed to find someone. He did, negotiate a salary, brought him on, and I was working directly with him, um, through my company with Custom Analysis, which was subcontracting to this Booz Allen equivalent.
okay, and so that's I think you also just uncovered another one of my assumptions. It sounds like the Booz Allen equivalent is very hands-off in terms of the the
It
project, whatever
in
the
in
project
this
is.
case, it was, that will depend on the particular project and what they were hired to do. But a lot are like that. They're just basically glorified staff augmentation
Right.
companies. That's not always true, but a good percentage, I would guess, of all government contracting is like that.
Is there any uh, so let me give you the closest analogy that I have from my life is that,
Yeah.
when I first when back when I was a musician, I was looking to like, do something during the day that was
Mhm,
going to get me paid using my database skills.
mhm.
I went to a staffing firm, I think it was Robert Half, and they did like sort of white collar staffing.
Yeah,
And they didn't, and they didn't have anything to do with it. There was not like an account manager or something that
yeah,
like, I wasn't on some team with a lead from Robert Half. It was literally they were just a matchmaking service, and then we took it from there, like me and the client.
yeah.
And eh, and there were very strict rules about the client hiring me directly.
Mhm, mhm.
So does something analogous exist in this scenario?
So I've never yes, the business model effectively of a place like Booz Allen or a company like Booz Allen or even a Deloitte is that where they'll just, whatever you cost, they bake in all their overhead and you know, minimum margin and then just price you out accordingly. So
Mhm.
that ends up being the business model. But to get the better rates, they got to pitch themselves as experts in whatever it is. It might be analytics or generic management consulting or something like this. So there's a little bit. I hate to sound so cynical, but I am a little cynical about about the whole industry where it's just, hey, we can do this whole, organizational transformation for you. That's how they sell it to the government, and the government
Mhm.
thinks that's what they're buying. But at the end, they're just like, well, we're just going to send 30 smart people with some maybe some criteria about how well they're doing and bill you accordingly.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of how I've seen it in at least the work I've done. Now there are companies that, oh, we need you to build a rocket. Like that's what we're hiring you to do. And if you don't build a rocket, you're not getting paid. It's like, okay, well, that seems legit. But there
Yeah.
are a lot of, just basically staffing type contracts that go on.
Mhm. Okay, and the booze out and the prime what are prime vendor, I guess,
The
the word?
prime, yeah, the prime
The
contractor.
okay, so the prime contractor is giving what? Estimates? Like, hourly estimate? Like, when the government decides, "Okay, yes, we're gonna sign on the dotted line. We're picking you for our, I don't know, HR consulting needs."
Mhm.
What are they agreeing to? Like, what is it just not everywhere, but just in your case, if was
Yeah.
it a certain number of people at a certain hourly rate with a certain number
Yeah,
of
it depends on the contract, but one simple version is, let's say the government, decides they need, I don't know, 100 new data analysts, and what they have to do to to be fair, have a what they call an open and fair competitive process is they'll put this out to announce it publicly, saying, "Hey, we are gonna bid out this contract for 100 new data analysts," and then a Booz Allen or Deloitte and a bunch of other companies will submit a proposal, and in that proposal, they will say, "We can do this for um, this price, and that price includes." Uh, it, you know, 10 senior data analysts at um, 100, $50 an hour, a few mid-level analysts at 125, and then some junior people at 100. And then the government, what they do is they'll assess the proposal in its entirety, pricing being an important component of that, and then they'll eventually select uh, a winner.
so are they just I'm curious, I use the word price very specifically. In a proposal scenario like this, when they're trying to compare apples to apples, like Deloitte
Mhm,
to Booz,
mhm.
are they getting prices or are they getting rates?
It depends on the contracts. So if it's a time, what's common is like a time and materials type contract. Um, so what they'll say what kind of contract it'll be upfront. They say this is going to
Mhm.
be a time and materials. We think we need this team to do this. You tell us how many people you're going to send. What type of jobs they're doing, what type of they call labor categories they're going to do, and what your best price is for those people on an hourly basis, priced out at for a full time person or a half time person, whatever they think the
Right.
configuration is, and then they'll assess. Then they'll assess the whole thing. Yeah.
How do is there some kind of criteria of like, and this is the success metric, or is it just, we'll just use this team as long as we need to, and we don't know how long it is?
Yeah. They a lot of times if it's just straight just we need a team, like they usually put out like some kind of like requirement or statement of work saying, they will automate this analytics process or data engineering stuff. So that's what they do, and they'll evaluate the contract as a whole after the prime has supplied, let's say they supplied all the people, and if they're just sitting on their butts and they haven't done any of this stuff, then they'll get fired, and maybe not paid. But it's a little bit, it's just another component of the pricing, and whether or not it's measurable or not is a little bit up in the air.
Mm,
They will get, but the primes are sensitive to getting rated. Like they will get rated on their performance, and that's logged in I forget what it's called, I think DPARs or something. But basically, there's a centralized like government system that has all the ratings by the government of their contractors they hire to do the work, and they
mhm.
rate them across different categories. So,
Mm, yeah.
yep.
Okay, so there's some at some level,
Yeah.
the prime is worried about customer satisfaction
Right. And
and
yeah.
yeah,
And they don't want to be fraudulent. Right. And it's kind of silly. Like a lot of this is one of the sillier things about, and I think what you get at with your hourly billing and stuff is like, oh, you said you're going to supply a senior data analyst, and in the contract it said like this person must have 10 years of experience doing, X, Y, and Z. And what you really want to be like is, well, who cares if we get the result, like who I have to
yeah,
do it. But the this is one of those things where because it's easy to measure, they do it, and they're so worried about uh the government's basically so worried about getting ripped off that they care about the letter of the law and not like the intent.
mhm,
So it's just one of those absurd things about federal contracting.
right,
Um, but I will point out to some of your audience that thinks it's impossible to get a firm fixed price. That's not exactly true.
mhm,
Um, I worked on a project where it was firm fixed price, but they priced it out essentially as what a full time hourly person would be,
mhm,
except the contract structure was firm fixed price. So as long as I delivered, like a monthly report and the client was happy, like I didn't actually have to be there full time to get paid.
mhm,
So that's a function of what the prime was able to negotiate with the government, or what the prime contract structure is. So there are opportunities. I think they're just kind of rare. I just kind of lucked into that one.
yeah, that would be I was that was gonna be my next question, but it sounds like that might be the only example of something that's a little bit more productized or just a fixed price project. Like, I remember Deloitte was the company that was brought well, who knows if they're subcontracting these people, they probably were, but Deloitte got the contract from the Rhode Island state government to implement the Obamacare website in the state.
Hmm.
And, it did not go well, to say the least, and Deloitte ended up getting sued.
Yeah.
So there's, and my suspicion is that there was probably some deadline, I'm sure there was
Hmm.
a deadline, and there was probably some security criteria, some quality level,
Hmm.
so a bunch of metrics. But I don't think Deloitte gave them a price, the Rhode Island state government. I don't think they gave them a price. I think they said, "We're gonna bring in this," exactly what you said.
Hmm.
"We're gonna bring in all these people with this experience, at 3 different levels of experience and 3 different
Hmm.
hourly rates,
Hmm.
and we're by us giving you this estimate," which is what it is, eh, implying that that is gonna reach all of the goals. Like, this is the
Yeah.
team it will take across this amount with this deadline to reach this goal, and they didn't even come close. So, like, not even close.
Yeah. It's not surprising, and they probably claimed that, "No, we did meet, the broader criteria, and you guys just you changed your
Yeah.
mind a bunch of
Well,
times."
we burned up so many hours debating what was in the contract and what wasn't in the contract that that's what drove up the cost. And, like,
Right,
that actually
right.
happened.
Now there are, this may be getting a little into the weeds, but, the government has a few different types of ways of doing business, right? So I talked about time and materials, but where they just basically, we need this many bodies at this price
Yeah.
for a full year.
Mhm.
Talked about fixed price, which is you give us X results and you tell us how much is that going to cost. So they do that.
Mhm.
But there's also cost plus fixed fee, where basically the government has they know their project is risky. Like, let's say you want to build some speculative new technology, like a new, fighter jet or something.
Mhm.
And what they'll do is they'll go, "Hey, we will reimburse all your costs." Sometimes they set a ceiling, like, let's say we'll reimburse your costs up to 50 million. And if you perform, we will pay you the, 10% or some uh, pre-negotiated, reward, essentially. Like
Right.
that's the fee part of this. So basically in those situations, like the the contractor assumes no risks for the costs, but they have upside in terms of, getting that fee. So,
Mhm.
um,
How do
so
you
that
think these different non-hourly engagements crop up? Because I certainly have had people say like, "Well, no, that's just the way we have to have an hourly rate.
Mhm.
Even if you're coming to give a speech, we have to have an hourly rate so that we can compare you to other people." It's like, that doesn't have it has nothing to do with anything, right? So, but it sounds like
Yeah.
I'm guessing there are just some relationships in place where the principals of the prime have a relationship with someone who has enough power to say, "Oh, we're gonna this is the people we want. This is the way they want to do the deal. That's acceptable to us. So we're gonna make an exception." Or is there a place someone could look where these kinds of non-hourly opportunities are supposed to be found?
Well, actually, the government's not hiding any of that, and it's not actually as, uh, I don't wanna say corrupt, but, like, nefarious or anything like that. Is For all its faults, the government tries to be transparent about how it does business. So, if you were to bid directly on a government contract, a lot of those opportunities are public information. Like, you can just go to the site called, sam.gov, and agencies will post a lot of stuff there. Like, one of them is, "Hey, they put out what's called an RFP, request for proposal. They're saying, "We need X. Um, Submit us a proposal." Of course, it has to be properly formatted and hit all these admin check marks or whatever.
Right.
Um, but it's going to be firm fixed price, or we intend it to be firm fixed price, or we intend it to be just time and material. So we need 5 people that do these things. Like, submit us your price and what their qualifications are going to be.
Okay.
So it's not some mystery, and the government would probably prefer to make everything firm fixed price because it reduces their risk, but
Right.
they can't, you know, they outsource so many things that it's like you would have to define the outcome every time, and really think through what they need, and then actually hold contractors accountable to the results. A lot of times it's just uh easier to do the time and materials. Like, it's just easy
Easier
to
to just
measure.
easier to waste the money.
Yeah, yeah, but in the correct way. So, um,
Easier
but
to start paying people before you actually know what the success criteria is.
right, but
I'm kidding, of course, but
no, I
that
agree. I agree with you. I mean,
yeah.
I what the thing though is, like, as a 1099, like, to do the non cynical thing. Like, if you work for yourself, you can get away from, like, doing obviously nonsensical things, because you probably have, like, you don't have to succumb to your whatever the corporate culture is, where, like, oh, like, only the engagement manager can talk to the client, and
Right.
they
Mhm.
they have certain incentives as an employee. um but if you're on site and you're working with the client, like, you can just talk to them and then just start doing the work you think matters and that they think matters, and that will endear you to the client, which gives you more leverage, um, as a solo 1099. Like, no prime, like, if they're being honest, they don't really want to bring on any consultants or independent consultants or 1099s or whatever. But if you got the leverage, you got the leverage. So,
Right.
um, and you take a little more risk, and you get compensated for it.
Right. Cool. So tell us about the transformation into hiring employees. So you said that well, you tell the story. Like, how did you end up with employees, and like how does that work for you?
Yeah. Well, the same business model, or the same reason. Um, well, basically, I don't like doing billable actually doing billable work and working with clients. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that, but it's just my personality is not suited towards that. And we just kind of got lucky in terms of, I did a good job for this one client, and the prime had an open spot. So I knew that using the same business model that the primes use, whereas, I charge them X and I pay, my employees a little bit less than X,
Hmm.
I can make money without me doing billable work. So I make
Right.
money off the employees. It's pretty, It's pretty simple. So when there was an opportunity, we hired someone. My partner who has a different government client and prime, did the same things. And we were just opportunistic for the first few years, but I was still working almost full time, doing billable work myself. And really, it's in the last few years where I'm like, I can't sit on the government side, and basically it's just another job now,
Right.
where I've gotten even more ornery about, um, listening to other people. So I'm like, well, if I just hire more people, eventually I can hire enough people to replace my income from doing billable work myself, and do other things that I want to do. So, um, but it's hard. The same reason valuable people can work for themselves, is the reason they don't want to work for a no brand company like my company, like Custom
Mhm.
Analysis. Um, but what I do is I try to, at least be like a real person when I try to recruit people, and be honest about, like, this is what the work is, and yes, I make money, but like I also will try not to do any big company corporate nonsense that you also probably hate. Um, which, is surprisingly one, it attracts a certain type of person, probably like me.
Mhm.
And they tend to do pretty good job at whatever I hire them to do. So yeah.
Cool. So how many employees do you think it would take for you to kind of reach margaritas on the beach level?
Oh, margaritas on the beach. I estimate, it's a little bit way my partner and I split up kind of the revenue and the profits or whatever is it's not necessary to go into, but for me personally, I think if I consistently had about 6 to 7 employees working full time, I could replace my own income, um, from doing billable work myself. So,
Mhm.
let's say your net margin, on an employee is maybe like, 15, 20% or something like that. That's the margin you capture as independent, the solo 1099, if you
Right.
work for yourself. So that just adds up to a number depending on what the contract is, and then, um, and then, yeah, in theory, I could sit there. But I will say, one of the things I like about your show is that well, you tell me, do you tend to attract people that just like working like solo, like staying solo?
Uh, I attract a lot of people who do work stay solo, and I don't know if they strongly prefer it the way I do,
Hmm.
but it does seem pretty rare that anybody asks me leadership questions or hiring questions or vetting employees. Like, nobody asks me that stuff. It's probably true that it's mostly people who intend to stay solo,
Hmm.
and value-based pricing is a great way to scale up as a soloist. So probably the combination of those, like, so it would make sense if I was attracting that kind of person because they don't know how to most people don't know how to scale without hiring employees. They
Yeah.
think that's the only way, and it's not the only way. So I talk about that specific soapbox quite a bit. So I would I think it's reasonable to assume that most of the people that are in my community or orbit in my orbit do not want to have employees, or maybe one partner, maybe a VA.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a partnership. Maybe they've got a VA. Maybe they've got one
Hmm.
part-time person doing some grunt work. But generally speaking, it's pretty rare for me to have somebody who runs a firm.
Right. Uh, and I think they are wise, for well, one of the funny things is I'm learning as I am trying to grow the business is like, oh, there's also a lot of things about growing it that I don't enjoy. And it's this particular model where with hourly billing, my my profit walks out the door if anyone quits, or like it's totally
Yeah.
dependent on like being able to recruit people. So like you have to get good not only at finding, projects for them to get on, but you also have to be good at recruiting people and keeping them, happy. And there's a lot more admin work that comes with it. And particularly in the government contracting world, to really get to, I could probably get to 6 or 7 and just subcontracting, and that would be fine. But to get to, 20, 40, 50 people, like you gotta do a lot of, you gotta do like a lot of networking. You gotta figure out all the admin stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I would also just caution people that are using, let's say they're in the government contracting industry already and want to go 1099 as a stepping stone to growing a quote unquote real government contracting businesses. It's a different job entirely, and if you think about it, I'm not sure you'd want it, or if it's worth it. Um, Whereas staying solo is actually pretty what's one of the things I talk about in my book. It's like people think it's a lot of admin. It's like actually not that much more admin. The paperwork just looks scarier than it actually is,
Mhm.
since it's not meant for individual people, it's meant for much larger companies. Um, but it's basically going solo is like it takes about as much work as someone who is trying to be diligent about moving up in their like employee career. And
Mhm.
that's about I think it's about the same amount of effort versus trying to grow a business. It seems it's like you got to be more entrepreneurial, do a lot of things that you don't want to do at least initially. Um, I don't know. It's just a different trade off, and
Right.
if I one I'm exploring now, but hey, if I sell enough books, maybe I don't have to do that either. So we'll see.
Well, it does. I mean, certainly hiring is a tried and true way to grow, especially a service business. It's like, yeah, it definitely can work, but like
Yeah.
you're pointing out, the admin doesn't go down. I
No.
mean, it goes up perhaps exponentially. It's like at least there's a I think the thing that you're revealing, I want to emphasize for people who are thinking about scaling up with employees is that my experience is that to get to margaritas on the beach stage, you need like 30 or 40,
Yeah.
where you've got people doing all the distasteful stuff that you have to do now. So not just the client work, but all the HR stuff and
Hmm.
benefits and you can just be a leader.
Hmm.
I'm being facetious with the beach margaritas thing, but like you can
Yeah.
just have a vision and promote the vision and have other people do all the administrative stuff. But you're talking about layers, maybe 2 layers of middle management at that point.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and it's all non-billable, by the way. So
Yeah.
it's right?
Yeah. 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 I'd imagine in what the government calls private sector, just regular,
Okay.
business. I would think that's true where margins are more competitive, and if you're especially not differentiated. Yeah, I think 30 to 40 people, but I think in at least in the government contracting industry, if you're just building out a service business, just to replace like a normal full-time income, like I think you can do it with pretty relatively minimal overhead, no manage like you do the little bit of admin management. Probably at 6 or 7 people, that gets you to just replacing your income. I think that probably works okay, you know, to 15 to 20. At that point, you're probably going to want someone else to help you, like a full-time
Right.
in-house person. So, I mean, the particular numbers I think don't um, matter, but that much. It's just more like the type. I think you have to be honest with yourself about the type of work you like doing. And not just thinking like, oh, it's just like more of solo work. It's like it's a different job
Right. And to be clear,
entirely.
you're still working, presumably, like, close to full time, but you're just not doing client work. Is that
Uh,
right or not really?
yeah. Well, I usually spend my time doing. Well, it's weird about trying to build a business. It's like it doesn't seem to take up full time, but I also don't seem to be getting that many results either. So, uh, but it's unclear what to be working on at a given time. But like I'll be going back to like a near full time, like billable project myself. But I was one of the nice parts about um, either working for yourself or now hiring employees is that while I don't have enough to write off, do the beach margaritas thing in perpetuity, like I was able to take the summer off and still have some kind of income
Cool,
from the employees. It's not
cool.
sustainable, but it was helpful. So like, there is an upside. There obviously people do it because there's an upside.
Right.
But I do want to talk about like just this solo thing for a second. Like, I don't know if you've talked to so many people that like the experience from being an employee to just even if it's hourly billing, just working for themselves. But like the amount of like corporate absurdity taking up brain space in your head like goes away and like you don't appreciate fully what that means. Like
Right.
I remember working at the last company, the HR consulting firm, the human capital consulting firm, one of the tasks they gave out to junior employees was to put together and send out the like company newsletter where they have like announcements, project updates, and whatever. You don't write it; you just basically copy and paste everyone else's stuff into it. But
Yeah.
and it was, they were like, it's a kind of a grunty task, grunt work task, but you know, you get your name known because your name is attached to the email or whatever. Good internal networking, whatever. But one of the few points that was kind of fun about it was you could put in like a little comic or something at the end of it, you know, show your sense of humor, make everyone laugh. So I remember
Uh-huh.
putting in like a Dilbert comic, you know, which is usually good for laughs in a corporate environment, but it
Right.
had one of those like edited swear words, you know, like they put like a dollar sign or smiley
Right.
symbols. So I sent it out thinking, oh, this is pretty funny, blah blah blah. And then a few hours later, I get a text from my boss who was like, "Hey, can you come see me tomorrow?" I was like, "Let's go. What's what's going on?" And I know I wanted to see him. And he's like, "Yeah, that could have been offensive, you know, to someone. So you know, just make sure there are no swears again or something." I was like, and I just rolled my eyes. Okay, but something like that happened again. I kept out. I put in a comic. It was didn't have a swear word, but it was maybe it was a little cheeky or something. And then I got the same text, and then he told me in the meetings, like, for the first time in company history, like this position will need to be supervised by me before the newsletter goes out. I will need to screen this. And at that point, I was like, oh my god, I don't know. I could. It makes you question your sanity. It's like, am I crazy or is the
Right.
company crazy? And I think, and as soon as I went to 99 for this company doing the exact same work I was doing before, but minus you know, well, the newsletter, but
Yeah.
also minus, you know, meetings and performance management stuff. It's like, wow, that was taking up a lot of brain space. And I was able to, you know, make more money, but also like pursue like this blogging project I was doing. And,
Yeah.
you know, I eventually took like a you know, longer honeymoon than I would have. And, you know, it's great. So like,
Yeah.
and that was done with hourly billing. So, you know, again, it's absurd, like on the face of it, or it's nuts. But I think it can be a stepping stone to doing, you know, lifestyle wise, especially if you're not already self employed or making money for yourself outside of regular W-2 employment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could go down this rabbit hole. I've gone down this rabbit hole for 10 years, so I probably don't need to rehash it. But I do wanna point out in this context, the context of this conversation,
Yeah.
that it is very easy. Like, it's to just if you're first going solo, you know, you're probably scared of a million things. You probably there's tons of unknowns. Hourly billing is super easy. Everyone expects you to do that. Everyone, you probably don't know any other way to do it anyway. You've probably been exposed to people while you were in corporate or in your whatever your existing full-time job was who charge hourly. So, and it's actually pretty low risk to you in the short term.
Hmm.
So you can people can spin up a low six-figure business as a soloist in some profession with hourly billing. The the trap is that you only get paid when you're doing client work. Let's just assume everyone's above board and
Hmm.
not padding their hours and so forth.
Hmm.
So the trap is that you can increase your salary dramatically or at least significantly by working more. So what do you end up doing? You end up working more
Yeah.
and you don't spend any time or most people don't have the discipline to carve out 50% of their week for marketing or other business building activities, biz dev, innovation, networking, uh, creation of marketing collateral, sales
Hmm.
calls. Like they don't think of any of that stuff. They're just like, oh well, if I get if I s- if I'm not billable, I'm losing $200 an hour.
Right.
If I'm on vacation at Disney, losing $200 an hour. So it just messes with your head in a way that makes it very difficult to break out of that, you know, what I refer to as the hourly trap. That's the trap is like you get
Yeah.
sucked into client work 40 hours a week or more.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will point out that one of the differences, though, I think with kind of your average, like you know, you're gonna make as a freelance, whatever, software developer versus doing it in the government space is that government contracts are like really long.
Mhm.
And you know, usually like I see what structure is like, oh, it's 1 year plus 4 option years, and then those happen and the government's not on the ball and they add a few more years. So uh,
Very
so
predictable.
right. So I would say it's probably less risk than the equivalent in the government space, like less risk than the equivalent private sector world. Like you can be on a project for, a couple years and during that, doing basically what you were doing before, but maybe less hours than full time. You can't just disappear forever. Um, so I think there's less risk of avoiding that track or avoiding. There's less risk of hitting that trap. I would say just by the structure of the government contracting world. But I'd also offer, one of the things I've also kind of thought about that, like I should, instead of taking Friday off or leaving home, leaving work to go take a nap, I should stay here and bill or whatever. One of the things that's helped me is saying like just predetermining the number of hours or income I want for the year. So like, the government usually bakes in like 1850 or 1860 hours, which is like maybe like 5 weeks of vacation or plus federal holidays or something like that. Like contractually, that's like the max you could work.
Yep.
So I would just go, well, I want to take an additional five. I want to take like 10 weeks of vacation. So okay, I'm only going to work 1,700 hours, and you just then you know what you're going to make, assuming you hit that, and you just track that, and it's fine. So I think that's a more that's just more of kind of mental accounting, I would say, but also like predetermining how much you're going to work. I think um, makes it so you don't have to make those decisions like every single day.
Right. Yeah, that's smart. The other thing that I think is an advantage here because of that extreme longevity of the
Hmm.
contracts, and it sounds pretty clear that you're only working one contract at a time.
Hmm.
So for someone who's got much smaller contracts and they need a lot more clients to get to that, call it close to 2,000 hours a year.
Hmm.
Very, very different situation,
Right.
so where it's less about, it's like I have students who work with CPA. I know a bunch of people in the CPA space,
Hmm.
know of people in the CPA space. More business is not the problem. Like
Right.
CPAs, it's almost like a law that you have to have a CPA to run a business. It might as well be a law. So leads is not their problem. Working too much
Hmm.
is their problem.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
it sounds a little bit, it reminds me of that. Like it's like getting the hours doesn't sound like the problem, where a lot of freelancers after their first year or two, they have a lot of trouble
Hmm.
getting leads. And so there's
Right.
this all kinds of scrambling. So there's much more feast famine cycle for someone that's used to not used to super long contracts like that. So I agree that that is a meaningful difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to do the feast famine freelance hourly thing either. Like that seems super stressful. But what's interesting is my wife, she also works for herself. She's not in the government contracting industry. And this is kind of one of those things where actually some people who are not in the government contracting world read my book and actually found it helpful. But
Hmm.
she basically, her story was she um, got a raise at her job, and then, she felt good about it. And then her boss accidentally sent the raise of someone who had just started, and she
For
was
the
already
salary.
yeah, her salary, and, like, she was making, like, substantially more, and she was perceived by my wife to be far less competent, which I'll take her word for it, I believe her, by the fact that she left not too long after, or was encouraged to leave, but she was so fed up, she quit, but then, a few weeks later, her boss was like, "Oh, you wanna do some contracting work for us or consulting?" And luckily, I had taught her, I had just started working for myself a few years ago. I said, "No, you gotta charge like, you know, one, like a lot more than your hourly rate, not just like your salary equivalent plus a little more.
Right.
You gotta like,
Right.
go double
Yes.
one, but also don't just go, oh, I'll work hourly as you need stuff." It's like I made sure they committed like a certain amount of retainer hours, which um that it wasn't monthly, but I think it was like every 3 months or something, like 3 month retainers. So at least you maintain some predictability.
Right.
And I got this from you. It's like try to get paid up front. So like pay for the retainer up front. So you're not doing all that. So that was all great advice from both from my experience and from your work. And she still works with her former employer under that a very similar arrangement. She's raised her rates and um, has picked up a few other clients under similar structures and is making pretty decent income for the amount of time she works, which is especially nice. We got two young kids in the house, so in terms of flexibility. So, it's again, I think a lot of the hourly stuff is contextual. I think your like fundamental analysis of like why it's like structurally doesn't work for both the client and for the people delivering the work. But there are like certain situations where I think, like you said, it does make sense, and you can get like a better deal than you had working as an employee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a fair summary, and I think for the right person who doesn't, because there's a bunch of people who probably have the personality to just want to be an employee and show up and do a great job at the thing
Yeah.
and not worry about getting new business or any of
Uh-huh.
that stuff.
Yeah.
But the trade-off there is you have, generally speaking, you have very low autonomy, very low
Mhm.
freedom of
Mhm.
your how you spend your time. And so, yeah, I mean, so for someone who's just not constitutional, someone who's unmanageable like me, you know, doesn't
I'll try, if you wanna come work for custom analysis, but, so
I'm unhireable at this point.
uh,
So, yeah, so for someone that's oriented that way, working for yourself is 1,000 times better than working for a boss or a manager
mhm.
or, some corporate bureaucracy or government, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, way better. And a very easy way to get started is hourly. This all, they're all, like you said, stepping stones.
Mhm.
The people who, just for the dear listener, if you are just starting out, just got out of a coding boot camp or something like that, and you start hourly, the thing to watch out for is working too many hours, not working on your business. You're just doing client work all the time. That is a warning sign. Then there are people who really need to hear from me who are gray in the hair and they have a couple of little kids at home and
Mhm.
they're working harder than ever and they're not getting ahead because their expenses are going up
Mhm.
and they're losing business to juniors who are undercutting their rates.
Yeah.
So, and they're like, the thing that probably the thing that keeps me up the nights most about those folks, the late 30s, early 40s, even early 50s folks who are feeling trapped in that hourly trap
Mhm.
is they think the only way out is to hire and and if they're only hiring because they want to make more money and not because they want to be a strong leader and share a vision and groom their employees and make their lives better too, then you really shouldn't be hiring
Right.
in my rose colored glasses worldview.
Mhm.
It's like, so those for those folks, there is a different way to create leverage in your business, mostly through pricing, but there are a bunch of other ways too. So yeah, I couldn't wrap up without putting a plug in for the
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know we have to get on here. If you have time, my one question for you,
sure.
it or one and a question for you rather, is, like, do you think, like, how much a lot of your audience seems to be, like, experts in their field, or that's how I perceive them from your podcast guests. Do you think it takes, is that like a personality trait where you wanna get really good at something the market values? Because like I only care about things I care about and not necessarily like what the market values. And it's hard for me to force myself to get better at stuff. So do you think like is it just people who are definite subject matter experts, or is it we're pretty good, but it's finding the right positioning or niche, or that doesn't actually require you to upskill, or what? I guess I'm curious about the profile of people who can best take advantage of your advice to value
Yeah,
price or positioning and all that.
yeah, that's interesting. So I think demographically speaking, if that's the right word,
Mhm.
I th- I came from software, and I have therefore told a lot of stories about software, and therefore have attracted a lot of software developers.
Mhm.
And for a very long time, and those people are by and large obsessed with getting better at their
Mhm.
craft.
Mhm.
For a very long time, that's coincidentally been a great way to make money because it delivered tons of value.
Mhm.
So I think those two things are not related.
Okay. The
And so
coincidentally is interesting, yeah.
yeah, the coincidentally piece, I think in the same period of time, there were probably like hordes of people who do scrimshaw or knitting
Mm.
who obsess about their craft, but there's just no economic value in it enough economic value in it to make a business. So I think it's an accident that people who obsess over making high quality software can actually make a really good living at it. It's just
Yeah,
not every craft has high economic value.
right.
So so then to the other what felt like the other piece of your question was, is it required that you obsess about your increasing your skills at your craft
Mhm.
to be very successful financially? And the answer is definitely not.
Mm.
Definitely not. So it doesn't hurt, but it's also there's an opportunity cost there where if you're good or even really good, I think I would consider myself a pretty good software developer, and
Okay.
I probably made way more money than most software developers,
Yeah.
but I was definitely not the best. I
Sure.
had serious expertise in some cutting edge mobile stuff, but I just wrote a big wave. I got lucky and wrote a big wave on that and was mostly doing advisory stuff and I wasn't really coding that much anymore. So I think what a combination of those two circles, if you imagine the Venn diagram of
Mhm.
like the activities that you enjoy engaging in is a big circle of stuff. For me, it'd be like playing drums,
Mhm.
coding for myself, like that list of things over the years. And it's like some of them you're going to make money at, some of them you're not.
Yeah.
And then the overlap with like demand in different markets, so that the exercise that I would go through is like, what do I like doing that I'm pretty good
Mhm.
at where there's demand or some demand that can be served with that combination of skills. So it might be that, um, what problems are people spending money to solve?
Right.
Like, where are they already spending money? And then, are these the kind I usually tell people, like, who do you want to work with? Who do you want to hang around with? Because you're going to be spending a lot of time with these people.
Mhm.
It's just one place you could start, but it's a pretty sometimes an easy place to start. I want to help these kinds of people. I like hanging around with creatives, people who make movies or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, okay, so that's a group of people. It's not necessarily a market. But if you look at those people and you say, what are those people spending money on?
Yeah.
Maybe it's books, maybe it's communities, maybe it's training, maybe it's workshops, maybe it's consulting, maybe it's coding, maybe it's 3D animation. What are they spending money on? And then, all right, where is the overlap between the things that they're currently spending money on and the stuff I can already do? Or even if you want to go super extreme, something I could learn.
Yeah. No, it's always good advice. I've always just had trouble, or it's never seemed to line up that way, except for in this government contracting biz. Like, I guess I serve bureaucrats in some capacity, and I'm not the best at data analysis, but I have the security clearance, so it's slightly narrower field where I can make some money. But it's tough. You do that too long, something you don't care about, and you're like, well, maybe I should hire people so I don't have to do this, and that's a trap, like you said yourself. So.
Yeah. The other thing is that I found as I got older, my orientation was less on it's weird. It like goes up a level of sort of like a meta level where I used to just love coding and I used to love when I would see people using applications that I built.
Mhm.
And then and then at some point, it was a slow transition, I suppose. I got more excited, more satisfaction out of transformations that were enabled, and it was a lot less around typing semicolons into a
Mhm.
text editor and writing the most elegant code that then people used and it didn't crash or go down or whatever,
Yeah.
into like the classic Joe Pine transformation economy from his the book is called The Experience Economy, but the last chapter is on transformations.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, I was like, "Oh, I just wanna be in the transformation business,
Mhm.
and I don't care if I do the thing, the whatever the skill is. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter to me anymore. I just want results." I just got focused on results instead of process, I guess.
Yeah.
So how
No,
can I get better at delivering results?
yeah, that makes sense. Well, results not required in government contracting. So,
That's right. It's loud and clear.
nor are they interested in them. So, it's well, I have to find another strategy, but no, that's it's fantastic. I always appreciate it. You know, work is something I've wrestled with, and I think a lot of people maybe I stumbled on to the 1099 thing and then the government contracting business side of it. But if I had to start over, it's not like something. It's not like, oh, I love doing this, but so I'm always curious about people that you know manage to find something they like doing and translating that into a business of some sort that they also like doing, and live a cool lifestyle because of it. So
Right.
it sounds like you've gotten there, or you've had multiple levels of that, culminating now in your helping people escape hourly billing.
Right. I think, yeah, there's another level. There's entrepreneurship as craft, which is another way to look at this question that you're bringing up, where you just like, not you, but someone just likes creating these sort of self-sustaining money engines, and that becomes the craft.
Yeah, I'm interested in owning a money engine. So Uh, yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's, thing I like, I like writing and stuff, but I only like writing about things I like writing about. And, that doesn't always overlap with what people want. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
I, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, the trick is find the desire. Like, don't try and create, or like, not that's not what you're suggesting, but I know
Mhm.
people think that, like, "Oh, build it and they will come," or
Yeah.
"I'm gonna write about this thing that I'm passionate about, and since I'm passionate about it, there must be a bunch of other." It's like, that's not demand, that's
Right.
entertainment, that's interest, and if
Right.
unless you're selling ads, then that's unlikely to it would just be coincidence if that went somewhere. So, it's like,
Got it.
where is there demand? Like, I know that there are podcast hosting companies. People pay podcast hosting companies. If I started a podcast hosting company, I
Mhm.
guarantee people would give me money. But why would they give me money and not Transistor or Simplecast or somebody else? So then it
Right.
becomes this like, how am I different? How's it different? How's this? But I know people buy. It's like Burger King opens up across the street from McDonald's because they know people are buying hamburgers on this
Right.
corner. So finding the demand, finding a demand, and you did find you actually have probably the thing that really grabbed my attention about the title of your book is it's so niche. Right? It's like very interesting, but I'm sure
Yeah.
how many people are there in the United States, let's say, who are working as a employee of one of these prime vendors or whatever you call them?
I can look that up, but it's many, and
It's got to be
people's
hundreds of thousands.
It's yeah, at any given time, probably hundreds of thousands. And well, the reason it's funny you talk about following demand with the book is the reason I wrote it was because I would be on these projects and there'd be other contractors at work and or at the client side. They'd be like, "You work for yourself, but oh, how'd you do that?" Always kind of want to work for
Mhm.
myself. Then I go into it, and then finally during COVID, I was like, "Oh well, good time to write the book." And like you, I offer a typo guarantee. Um, in it, and it was really enjoyable to write it. And again, I'm not good at marketing or haven't taken the time to learn all the marketing and stuff, but I did take a page out of doing the daily email, or at least goes out Monday through Friday, and my as of today 140 subscribers I think enjoy it, or
Cool.
at least a percentage of them enjoy it. So and I've enjoyed writing those as well. But yeah, it's who knows? I don't know how many people out there. I know at least a lot of people I think about it, whether or
Mhm.
not whether or not they'll want to think about it enough to buy my book. Who knows? But it's a fun experience either way.
Well, let's find out. So, dear listener, if you or someone you know is thinking about becoming a 1099 for a government contract or contractor, then where can they go to find out more about maybe your mailing list or your book? Where's the best place?
Yeah. So if you go to 1099 fedhub.com. I should probably change that name, but 1099fedhub.com. You'll find information about the book, and there'll be a tab for a newsletter where you can subscribe and get a free chapter. I think the one that you get at the moment is about how to figure out what your bill rate should be. But yeah, you should go to that site and you should figure out whether you even should go 1099 and whether that's the right path for you if you're already in this industry. And hopefully I can shortcut that decision process for you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Dale.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly. Bye.